This was the broadcast of Major General Philip F. Young on 12 January 1970, signaling a ceasefire of the now 30-month-old Nigerian Civil War and the penultimate step in ending a bloody, costly conflict that had resulted in the loss of millions of lives and widespread devastation across the area formerly known as the eastern region of Nigeria. This 5-minute broadcast had, however, been preceded by a momentous series of events with immediate origins on a date almost 4 years prior, months of bitter political crisis leading to a bloody, costly war. I am Ezennia Ugonabo Emeka Ikazo, a lawyer and historian. The Nigerian Biafra War is integral to my own life story in that I and my family were witnesses to the war. It left deep imprints on our conscious and subconscious, as well as for all others who experienced it. Understanding the whole anatomy of this war and its impact for me required a journey of rehearsal or re-examination, not just from my own perspectives, but from that of several individuals with varied experiences of the war, accounts from witnesses told honestly and without agenda, otherwise than a simple desire to tell personal stories and leave you, the viewer, to form your own opinions at the end of the day. That is our aim here. Join me on this journey as we look back at some of the most significant and tragic episodes in the life of a people, an historical chronology that traverses a mixed field of events and circumstances, with overarching clouds of tragedy in pall over incredible heroism, kindness and charity, laying next to treachery and unimaginable cruelty. Tales of desperation and hunger, side by side with ingenuity, innovation, superhuman discipline and forbearance. We look back at the events, but fundamentally, we feel the human experience of this conflict from many who have never spoken on record of their experiences of the war before now. These are their stories. The Nigerian nation enjoyed a triumphant independence ceremony on the 1st of October 1960, with pomp, pageantry and optimism. The nation was seen as the star of Africa. Independence was supposed to usher in a golden age of renaissance for the black race. This euphoria was sadly to fade away. By December 1965, there was a thick undercurrent of unease in the Nigerian political landscape. This was soon to precipitate in dramatic fashion. On 15 January 1966, a group of middle-ranking army officers, led by Army Majors Kaduna Nzogu, Emmanuel Ifajuna, and Wale Ademoyiga, in an attempt to overthrow the government of Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Prime Minister of Nigeria, mount an operation that resulted in the assassination of the Prime Minister and a number of government officials, including the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Amadu Bello, the Premier of the West, Chief Samuel Akintola, Minister of Finance, Chief Festus Okotiebo. Also killed are a cadre of some of the most senior army officers, including Brigadiers Zakari Maimalari, Benjamin Adimulegun, Colonel Skur Mohammed, Yakubu Pam, Abogola Gema, Arthur Onegbe, and the spouses of Sir Amadu Bello and Brigadier Ademulegun.
When the coup happened, 15th of January 1966, I went to Sir Ojukwu's house in Alexander Avenue. I got there, and then he broke me the news that his son, Emeka, that's Emeka Ojukwu, had called him to say there was a coup. And then secondly, my uncle, my mother's younger brother, Dr. Nwafọ was the acting president, living in a state house. He told me also the situation was very tense around the state house. So it was confirmed to me that there had been a coup.
The coup was styled on revolutionary idealistic lines pursued in Cuba and Egypt before this time. Towards an end, as Chukwuma Kaduna Nzogu, one of the plotters, put it, to build a strong, united and prosperous nation, free from corruption and strife.
What led to the coup was that since the British gave the Nigerian politicians our independence, instead of doing the right things, they continued going the other way around.
Whatever idealistic aims the plotters advanced, there would be legitimate questions about the rationale for taking the lives of the casualties of the coup. There were those directly and tragically affected by their deaths.
My father was General Yakubu Pam. He was Adjutant General of the Nigerian Army. He was 33 years old when he was killed in the early hours of January 15th, 1966 at about 2 a.m. according to records. 2 truckloads of soldiers under the command of the Deputy Adjutant General of the Army, Major Humphrey Chukwuka, burst into our home, shut the door down, and abducted my father. Shortly thereafter, he was executed by a burst of machine gun fire on the lawns of the golf course beside our home in Ikoyi.
The fledgling revolution was, however, foiled by the general officer commanding the Nigerian army, Major General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi. In a twist of circumstances that remained contentious, Major General Ironsi assumed the headship of government with the consent of Dr. Abyssinia Nwafọ Orizu, the President of the Senate, an acting president in the absence of the substantive Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was on an extended vacation at this time. Major General Ironsi became the head of state of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on January 16, 1966. In short, Nigeria was now under the rule of a military government.
28th May 1966. In the aftermath of the promulgation of Decree 34, widespread violence explodes in northern Nigeria, with several hundred persons of eastern Nigerian origin killed or maimed.
And the climax for me was when 30,000 Easterners who were trying to get home from the north were knifed and killed at Kano Airport. When that happened, I felt this was not the Nigeria I knew.
29th July 1966. A mutiny led by military officers of northern origin takes place at the Abeokuta Army Barracks, and several Igbo officers are killed. The violence spreads to Lagos, especially at the Ikeja Barracks, and later to Kaduna, where several more officers are captured and killed.
Major General Ironsi, who had been at Ibadan as a guest of the governor of the Western Region, Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi, was kidnapped alongside his host and eventually killed.
1st August 1966. The regime of Major General Aguiyi Ironsi is confirmed as overthrown. A 31-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, the most senior surviving army officer from northern Nigeria, is announced as head of state.
Over 50,000 Easterners were confirmed as killed in the violence. In response, on the 2nd of August, Lieutenant Colonel Emeka Ojukwu, military governor of the Eastern region, challenged the authority of the new head of state, stating that the office of the commander-in-chief was not vacant, as Ironsi and Fajuyi's bodies had not yet been found. He argued that Brigadier Babafemi Ogundipe, as the next most senior officer, ought to succeed the missing Ironsi. A political impasse now ensued. 2 attempts are made at resolution of the crisis. The first is a constitutional conference convened by the federal government in August 1966 at Lagos. The Eastern Nigerian delegation fails to attend in full complement as a result of security concern. The second is a series of peace conferences convened by the military head of state of Ghana, General Ankra at Aburi, Ghana. The first holds over 2 days from the 4th to the 5th of January 1967 and results in an agreement in principle for a strong federated structure for Nigeria with substantial regional powers. While both parties hailed the event as a success immediately afterwards, the Nigerian government reviewed its position on the terms agreed after consultation with senior civil servants, and the tensions re-emerged.
As this crisis rose to a flashpoint, was that I wished that the problems we had in those days were being handled by politicians. They would have found a way of pulling away from the brink.
On the 19th of April, the Eastern Region government takes over all federal government establishments in the region. The federal government responds with the effective economic blockade of the East after a meeting of the Supreme Military Council on the 22nd of April. The last week of the month of May 1967 was to prove the most crucial in this crisis.
26th May 1967, the Eastern Region Consultative Assembly begins a 2-day meeting to consider the region's future. A proposal for the secession of the region is considered. At the conclusion of the meeting on 27th May, the secession of the region from the Federal Republic of Nigeria is unanimously passed.
Your meeting today is very crucial. The East is at the crossroads. Since our last meeting, everything possible has been done by the enemies of the East to escalate the crisis in an attempt to bring about the collapse of this region. They have failed and will continue to fail.
When things like that happen, the quality of the informal consultations before that massive congregation is important.
On the 31st of May 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon announces that the federal government shall crush the rebellion in the East. Both parties now prepared for war.
I always wanted to be a soldier, and my father didn't like it. All I ever did was how I'm going to join the Biafra army. I was rejected 3 times, but in the end, I managed to get in.
My very good friend in Enugu joined the army when we were in Enugu. And we thought the war was like a James Bond film. You go there, you shoot, you are killed, you come back tomorrow and fight again. One of my friends sneaked through boys' company that we were in, into militia, and then regular army. And the day he came back in uniform, we were all crying, look at our mates.
Professor Lab told me, you want to go back to Nigeria, they will waste you. They don't know the power of intellect you possess. They will waste you there. I said, no, I must enter Biafra. I must join the fight.
There were 2 of us from the Air Force. There was another Navy guy who was held in detention at the guard room. The Air Force commander, he drove down in his Red Beetle to take myself and the other colleague away from the guard room. He drove us straight to the airport where our other colleagues were.
Before the declaration, we were prepared.
From there, I entered Biafran Air Force, So I was in the Biafran Air Force till the war ended.
4th July 1967, a device planted by suspected Biafran insurgents explodes near the police headquarters of Alinde, Lagos, claiming 4 lives. 6th July 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon orders 2 brigades amassed at Biafran's northern borders to advance and recapture the territory. Gunfire is exchanged at Gakem, near Obudu. The Nigerian 1st Infantry Division, led by Colonel Mohammed Shua, makes swift advances into Biafran territory. Biafran troops mount initial strong resistance. However, by 14th July, Obudu and Nsukka fall. Enugu, the capital, is threatened. 9th August 1967, Biafran troops, led by Lieutenant Colonel Victor Banjo, enter into the Midwest region.
Conscripted, I was written to and ordered to report at the Biafran military brigade at Benin. I went and thereafter entered into all these adventures.
The Midwest Offensive had Lagos as its ultimate objective, and Biafran troops advanced as far as Ore in the western state on the 20th of August, capturing the important linear town. The Nigerian 2nd Infantry Division, led by Colonel Murtala Mohammed, entered the Midwest via Auchi and advanced towards Benin, which was recaptured on the 20th of September. The Biafran-appointed administrator of the Midwest, Colonel Albert Okonkwo, fled with his staff and crossed the River Niger barely 7 days after his appointment on the 13th of August. On the 5th of October 1967, Enugu falls.
It was a terrible thing that we were at Enugu now. They started shelling Enugu. We have to now pack. You have no choice but to pack with your family and start running to where the shelling was not coming. And they definitely run to your home. And my car could not contain much. As much my car contained with the human being and this thing, I just have to carry it. We have to run.
6th October 1967, Umuahia replaces Enugu as the Biafran capital. 6th October 1967, Asaba falls to federal troops.
One of the worst tragedies of the war had occurred at Asaba and environs on its capture by federal troops. After the occupation of Asaba, they had embarked on an orgy of cold-blooded murder, with unarmed civilian residents of the town shot dead in large numbers.
In fact, what happened in Asaba was unfortunate. We killed many Asaba people, very many. Okay, it's entirely out of madness. Okay, hysteria, war hysteria, killed many. And then a few days after, we now went to Onitsha, and many of us were killed. So nemesis. You see, the teaching, the principles of war, never you take innocent soul.
There were highly personal accounts of this tragedy also.
Part of the first set of killings they had was in that on the 5th and the 6th. And the 6th, they killed 2 of my cousins with their friends in our family house in Omonko in Asaba here.
That time I dropped my what I was carrying. I got up and saw Murtala Mohammed in a black car. They slowed down. They were polite. Madam, what is wrong? I said, they've taken my husband and the brother. I said, don't worry, nothing will happen to them. Don't worry, don't mind. That gave me the courage to go home. But on getting home, I saw my mother-in-law and everybody sitting there. I said, I had to go back. That getting back, that's when they were picking people to kill. Not women, no, men were picking people to kill until we got to the police station. At that time, my husband and the brother had been killed, one on top of the other.
October 1967, Ukwabi Asika, a lecturer in political science at the University of Ibadan, is appointed administrator of the liberated areas of the East Central State.
He was already outside. He was back in East Africa, but something was calling him.
19th February 1968, Oka falls. 21st March 1968, Jamestown and Oron also fall. 22nd March 1968, Onitsha finally falls to the 2nd Infantry Division.
cousin of mine, one of his men was shot. And he thought, okay, they've retreated. So he went back to get one of them. And a sniper got him in the head.
This setback was, however, a prelude to one of Biafra's greatest victories in the war. On the 31st of March 1968, Federal troops of the 2nd Infantry Division, traveling in a long convoy of men and equipment, were ambushed by Biafran forces in the town of Abagana.
April 1968. The Nigerian Air Force, with the recruitment of Egyptian pilots, intensifies bombing raids on Biafra.
So I was brought to Aba, and a week later I collapsed in Aba market and was unconscious for 6 days.
You could say good morning to someone now and not see the person again.
Well, we got married in Umuahia, October, what was it, 68, yeah. I made my own wedding dress myself.
One question that has arisen through the years being the agency of the non-Igbo ethnic peoples of Biafra. Did you ever feel a sense of less favorable treatment?
No, I did not. Neither did any of us. And as I've mentioned these names, Okokondem was worshipped, adored everywhere he went in Biafra. You didn't have that feeling. It may have happened in the crowds that we didn't mix with, but you didn't have that feeling.
Some people concluded that my father perhaps decided to support Biafra because his wife was Igbo, my mother. But actually, I don't think that was the reason.
In April 1968, both sides agreed to a ministerial-level conference to be held at a location in Africa, with preliminary talks in London, which hold on the 6th of May 1968. The meeting agrees a full conference to be held in Kampala, Uganda, from the 23rd of May. In the interim, on the 13th of April, Tanzania becomes the first country to recognize Biafra, followed by Gabon on the 8th of May, the Ivory Coast on the 14th of May, and Zambia on the 20th of May. Further meetings held on the 20th of July 1968 and at Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on the 5th of August 1968. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu attended the Addis Ababa talks, accompanied by Gabonese delegates.
31st June 1968. France recognizes the Biafran right to self-determination and calls for an end to the hostilities. 19th May 1968. Port Harcourt is captured by the troops of the 3rd Marine Commandos led by Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Adekunle.
Biafra's last seaport and last remaining international airport was lost. Biafra, in anticipation of losing its main air link, responded by constructing an airstrip in the town of Wuli in May 1968, which was maintained by a cadre of dedicated engineers and specialists. The war raged and casualties mounted not just from the direct causes of the war, but from the severe food shortage that devastated what was left of Biafran territory. The economic blockade from 1967 resulted in a dearth of imported food. The disruption to food production by the war was also at the core of the Biafran food crisis. The main planting season for cassava and yams was within the period at which the dramatic early losses of territory occurred, namely August to November 1967. Hence, the impact of the dislocation of the farming cycle began to be felt during the harvest period, June to September 1968. The crisis had been foreseen as early as 21st November 1967 by the Danish church charity Dan Church Aid and Norwegian Church Relief, who had been present in the territory long before the war started. Also, the Catholic charity Caritas was actively involved at this stage. Thus, Catholic and Protestant church agencies began in 1968 to organize food relief from Lisbon, Portugal to Biafra, landing at Port Harcourt. The International Committee of the Red Cross ICRC was also actively involved in the relief effort. After the fall of Port Harcourt, airlifts were transferred to Uli, and it soon became one of the busiest airstrips in Africa. The work of the Red Cross and the church relief agencies, without any form of exaggeration, saved hundreds of thousands of lives in Biafra.
Then I was pregnant, and that pregnancy, I'm sure, was what made the whole thing tough for me. There was a time we would go without food, even as a magistrate. My husband was.
The work of the ICRC was coordinated by the Biafran Red Cross, which was headed by Reverend Moses Ilo.
war started, we found out that we had nothing. I hear that in the armory they had less than 300 rifles when the war started. In the armory at Enugu, I think 270 rifles they say. But the spirit of the Igbos, the spirit of self-defense, the spirit of having no choice than to fight back, sustained us in the battle, in the war, and we lasted those 3 years.
Another area of exceptional endeavor for Biafra was its local defense technology industry. At the heart of this was the Biafran Research and Production Organization, RAP. To address its resource disadvantage, it looked to its cadre of indigenous scientists and engineers who even before the war had begun research under the name the Science Group. A consistent complaint by observers, and alluded to earlier, was the Nigerian Air Force's seeming focus on civilian targets. These air raids intensified at the end of 1968 and early 1969, with heavy civilian casualties resulting from such raids.
Why did you join the Biafran Air Force?
Well, I had a month's holiday and I can't go down to Mallorca and bake in the sun and just enjoy life. I have a father of 6 children and 5 grandchildren. And I have seen people being shot to pieces, children being ruthlessly shot to pieces by Russian MiGs, months and months in Biafra. And as a man, I couldn't face my family sitting at home, so I went down to do my best to stop those MiGs to shoot the population of that country.
The Biafran Navy, headed by Commander Wilfred Anuku at its peak, possessed 6 small seacraft, and after the fall of Port Harcourt, was limited in its operations.
First, I was in charge of defense of Port Harcourt. There were 2 of us, myself and then Sub-Lieutenant Colonel. 2 of us were in charge of a defense point, Dawes Island. We are manning the gun position there because we had no vessels.
Biafra faced a major onslaught from April 1969, with the Nigerian army newly equipped with vast quantities of British-supplied armored personnel carriers and heavy artillery. The results were telling. In the first week of April 1969, Ovim, Uzuakoli and Ahaba are captured. On the 15th of April, Bende falls. On the 23rd of April, in spite of fierce resistance, Umuahia, Biafra's second capital, falls. Once again, Biafra responded. On the 24th of April 1969, the Biafran army recaptures Owerri, previously lost on the 15th of September 1968.
27th August 1969, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe withdraws his support of Biafra at a press conference at the Nigeria High Commission, London.
His account was that he had been held under virtual house arrest for a year and was in fact highly critical of the Biafran government. Almost overnight, the hero became a villain to the Republic of Biafra.
11th January 1970, Major General Ojukwu delivers a broadcast on Biafran radio announcing that he's travelling out of Biafra to explore possibilities for peace.
For most Biafrans, the war was over.
We were at Ruala and we were listening to the broadcast. Ojukwu had this broadcast, and I won't forget this sentence. He said he was going in search of peace. And I told the members of the family, the war is over.
12th January 1970, Major General Philip Effiong delivers a broadcast announcing a ceasefire pursuant to a surrender. 14th January 1970, Effiong travels to Lagos accompanied by 12 senior Biafran officials. He signs the surrender and reads out a speech formally signalling the end of the conflict.
So by that 12th of January, I was on the road coming back. I never knew that I would set my feet on the soil of Nnewi.
The feeling was not of joy that the war was over. It was a sort of, there was a relief that we had survived.
The last Sunday at Army headquarters, we had a sermon, and the pastor said, whatever is happening, this war is coming to an end, and he has seen the end of the war. Everybody should fast. I said, but we're all fasting. During the war, there was no food. So telling me, he said we should fast, that he has seen the end of the Civil War. So my other brother called me and said, look, the war is over.
My mother had packed, when the news came, she had packed little sacks. Okay. Suddenly, there was an explosion, and just next door. So we all had to get up and run. We must have run for at least a full day. We finally went into some jungle, deep jungle. That's where we stayed until the end of the war.
On the 12th of January, General Gowon delivered an end-of-war speech in which he ordered a general amnesty and in which he also announced a no victor, no vanquished policy. The news of war's end filtered through former Biafra, and droves of humanity poured out in their thousands onto the roads. Battered, hungry, weary figures of men, women and children, clutching whatever meager possessions they owned, trudged to wherever they could call home. Homes that many had not seen in years, if the home still existed. All said and done, there was relief for survival. Biafran soldiers took off their uniforms and faced the long walk home. Their war was over. They were the lucky ones. Many of their colleagues were dead and buried, others were dead, but walking. The Igbos of the former Biafra were now indigenes of the East Central State, administered by Biafra, which was now responsible for their care. It announced the application of a 3 R's policy, meaning rehabilitation, reconstruction, and reconciliation. Transition from Biafran JCA relief distribution to Nigerian government control was a difficult one. It, however, soon got to grips with the problem, supported by the Nigerian Red Cross. There was, however, the contribution of selfless individuals like Tai and Sheila Sholari, who tirelessly collected relief supplies and at their own expense transported them to the war-ravaged areas. On the 24th of January, Alhaji Sule Katagum, chairman of the Federal Civil Service Commission, published detailed guidelines for the reabsorption of former Biafran civil servants into the federal, East Central, Southeastern, and River State civil services. Igbo returnees flooded to metropolitan centers around the country, seeking any means possible to resume their normal lives. Lagos witnessed a flood of impoverished but determined Igbo men and women of all ages looking for a means of livelihood. Most eventually found their way into various establishments, eager and ready for any opportunities available. There were, however, other obstacles in the path of former Biafrans.
7th April 1970. The government announces a deadline for exchange of defunct Nigerian currencies held by those in the war zone, on condition that the accounts had not been operated since 30th of May 1967. The government also announces the payment of an ex gratia sum of £20 to all those who emerged from Biafra.
At the end of the war, the whole lot, whether you're a billionaire, a millionaire, thousandaire, we all received equal amount of money, £20. And it was this £20 that rooted all these things we are now seeing, because Igbos are dynamic.
The River State Abandoned Property, Custody and Management Edict No. 8 of 1969 was enacted shortly after the capture of Port Harcourt by the government of Lieutenant Commander Diete Spiff. It assumed custody of properties abandoned by owners who had fled during the war. While there were similar laws in other states, it was only in River State that the majority of the owners were not reinstated into their properties post-war. This was the background to the life that faced most Igbos after 3 years of brutal war and strife. Many succumbed to grief after the war, unable to cope with the psychological effect of the aftermath of the war. However, the vast majority picked up their lives and trudged on, bloodied but unbowed. No better demonstration of the mindset of the Igbos at this time than was evidenced by the words of Danny Bekwe QC, the Commissioner for Works, who declared to his staff on resumption that this was no time for tears. They and the people of the state responded accordingly. The University of Nigeria, one of the early victims of the war's devastation, suffered serious damage from the fighting and the occupying federal force on its premises for 3 years. Some hawks within government viewed Nsukka as a hotbed of secessionist thinking and pushed for it to be shut down. However, a strong lobby spearheaded by Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Ukpabi Asika, and Alhaji Ado Bayero, the Emir of Kano, prevailed, with the support of General Gowon. Thus that by the 8th of February 1970, the imminent reopening of the university was announced. Professor later Eze, Vincent Chukwuemeka Ike, was appointed as administrator. It eventually reopened its doors on the 21st of March 1970. Igbo post-war renaissance was not restricted to commerce and infrastructure. In the arts, the revival was to be seen early with the emergence of Igbo cultural groups after the war. The state entered the Atilogu troupe as contestants in the National Arts Festival of 1970. The troupe, led by the master impresario Mazi Ukono, surprised the nation by winning the prestigious Golden Gong. If there was a post-war symbol of the Igbo Renaissance, it was the emergence of Rangers International Football Club.
Most important thing anybody should bear in mind is that these boys called Rangers, they made a lot of sacrifice on the Igbo.
Rangers, after the war, we were fortunate to bring back several corps to this part of the country, and that gave the Igbos the confidence.
There are some games that are special games. You're made to know that this game is unlosable.
Call this holy, 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 holy. Enugu Rangers, another savior, holy, holy.
The question remains, were lessons learned from the war?
Sadly, no. If lessons have been learned, Nigeria won't be in the situation where we are.
War is not the answer. It's never the answer.
You have to forgive. Forgive. Forgive who? I've forgiven whatever happened. Not, I can't say I forgive this man, I forgive that, but it's I don't know. I'm not taking it against anybody.
I don't think enough lessons were learned. Clearly, the war was fought because of a state of injustice in the country. Nigeria still remains a very unjust society.
One of the consequences of that meant that a certain kind of impunity was allowed now in Igbo land that could not, things that were not considered possible. The hope we had in Biafra for self-determination is not lost. We don't need a war to get it again. We don't necessarily need an independent state of Biafra to get it. We can get it under a restructured Nigeria.
My father, I think with a lot of tough men, these days I'm very skeptical about the idea of a tough man. I got the sense that he hadn't processed the war as well as he could have, and I know there were lots of traumas there. He would say, he would make off-the-cuff remarks like, in the first 6 months of the war, every day somebody he knew would die, and somebody he knew very well, you know, a classmate, a relative would die. And he said, he would say things like, you know, the first 6 months of the war were heroic, after that it was just slaughter, you know, people being slaughtered.
We were in rags, but we did not know we were in rags. We ate once or twice a day, but we thought it was normal. Over the years, they became millionaires and multi-millionaires. The Biafran spirit died.
Let's know what is our differences, how we can amend those differences.
In April 2001, my mother had the opportunity to meet again with Major Humphrey Chukwuka. Their first meeting since that cold early morning hours of 15th of January 1966. They talked, they prayed together. She said to him that she had forgiven him, and I know she had, from deep down in her heart. And it was such a significant moment.
We are now at the end of our journey of memorial travel. However, it is fitting to formally pay tribute to the real start of our story. The generation that rebuilt from nothing, who picked up the pieces from the debris of their lives. At the same time, we solemnly remember those who did not survive the war. Men, women and children who had no stake or contribution to its causes, yet paid the supreme price. We pay tribute to those who for no other reason than survival defended their families and in many cases gave their lives. We pay tribute to the incredible humanity of those from all over the world who stood up to be counted and contributed to the survival of the innocents of war. We also pay tribute to those who, even though combatants on the other side, stood up for humanity. We salute those who, after the war, welcomed friends long gone during the conflict and embraced them in the spirit of true brotherhood, love and compassion. Most importantly, we salute the spirit of humanity that this tragic conflict showcased in its finest form. May we never experience the horrors of those years ever again, but more importantly, may we be blessed with a society that promotes justice, equity, fairness, love, and true brotherhood. It is possible. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. Umibo, Udodilongo. May we be blessed with a society that promotes justice, equity, fairness, love, and true brotherhood. It is possible.